and good evening and welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening. It's a slightly different evening and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but I just have one guest. It's not just one guest, it's Professor Mary Renfrew, but she's with us to really answer questions at the end of her presentation. But because we always do this to our guests, I'm going to invite her to share one of her moments of the week. I'm sure she's had more than one. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Sue. I have had a few moments this week, but there's really only one that makes it through to this programme because it tops out everything else in that I had a new grandson born. We already have 4 granddaughters, so there's great excitement among the girls that there is now a little boy joined us. So I've been a bit preoccupied this week with helping out there, and it's lovely.
Oh, wonderful. That's so lovely. Congratulations, and congratulations to the whole family. So it's the first boy
First boy
with 4 girls.
with 4 girls.
He is going to be so spoiled.
Yeah, really is.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, we'll let Mary have a little rest because in a minute we're going to have Mary's presentation. But let me just go through. First of all, welcome to all of you who are new to Maternity Midwifery Hour, because I know there'll be a lot of you who are new and who haven't been on the hour before, and as well as our old friends and colleagues who are joining us this evening. This all started at the COVID lockdown in 2020, 5 years ago, when we felt that because midwives and student midwives couldn't go out to study days and conferences and festivals, we felt that they needed some sort of link, some sort of activity, and also source of information, continuing professional development, but also a lot of information about COVID at that time. So we started the hour and we did a lot about COVID and a lot about the changes that had to be made to services, maternity services to midwifery education to keep everything going. Now, this seems a long, long way away, 5 years ago, but actually, sometimes it comes back to you. You see the little imprints on the kind of car parks where you're meant to stand in the huge queues that we used to be in, and it all comes back. But the maternity hour has stayed with us. Obviously, we're not doing very much about COVID at the moment. We might do a little review of that next season, but we've carried on doing things that are of interest to midwifery because it is always a time when we need lots of information, knowledge, and research. Especially research. We like research. And also the good thing is the learning activities that we have. Now, I have to also remember everything that Maternity Midwifery Forum does is recorded. So should there be a crisis, like you have a power cut, don't panic because you can catch up at a bit later. Everything's recorded and looked after by our friends at Matflix, and you'll find on the resources list there's a link there that you can find the Matflix resources. Now, if you're lucky, your maternity service or your midwifery university will have a subscription to Matflix. If not, you can get your own subscription. And remember, these things are tax deductible, just in case you didn't know that. Health warning, and I've given this warning about 6 times this series because I know it happens to me. You go into Matflix to look for something, some topic, and there's loads of information there. Beware, because you can find yourself 5 hours later having gone through all sorts of really interesting things. It's not 5 hours, maybe 3 hours or 2 hours. But anyway, just be warned. It's very addictive and it's really full of very useful information, especially if you're doing project work, a dissertation, or for those of you who are due a revalidation, very, very useful because there's also lovely box sets which are curated by Dr. Jenny Hall with lots of materials with little reflective activities and questions. Perfect for revalidation. So there you are, my selling point for the day. Now, and you can do share when you're going to find this evening really interesting. So do feel free to share with your colleagues and your friends because it's a really good way of learning and understanding things within midwifery. Now, yesterday, and I've got this full of, and Mary's the same, full of the fact that yesterday was the Northern Manchester Festival, which was a fantastic day. Met some wonderful midwives, wonderful students, and who really enjoyed it. Lovely buzz, and lots of fantastic presentations, and they'll all be on Matflix. And if you went to the Manchester Day live, you'll get your box set. And if you went online, you'll still get the box set. So, have a look at it, share with colleagues, and go through all the presentations. They're fantastic. Now, today, this month is Plastic Free Month, aiming to end use of single-use plastic, reuse and recycle. That's the name of the game. It's also the Samaritans Talk to Us month, and they're really focusing on raising awareness of mental health issues. So have a look at their website at some point. It's still Group B Strep Awareness Week from the 8th to the 14th, and they've got a really good support website, which I think I put on last week's resources, so it's quite available. And also on the 16th of July, which is next week, the RCM are doing a summit on safety within maternity care with lots of quite high profile people going to discuss what needs to be done within maternity midwifery. So look out for any little bits on Twitter or any other social media. And also I'm sure that the RCM will be releasing different press releases prior to and during and after, and keep an eye on for that because they're really useful. You need to know what's going on in maternity and midwifery at the moment. Now, I'm almost perfect timing now, I think. Yes, I am. I'm galloping ahead because I want as much time as possible for the presentations. Now we had we had lots of presentations, but we've selected 2 presentations which will be useful to you. Now, the first is a presentation from Dr. Kathryn Gutteridge, who will be known by many of you as an independent consultant midwife. She's an honorary associate professor of midwifery and psychotherapist, and a past president of the Royal College of Midwives. And her career has included being a nurse, neonatal nurse, and a midwife. And also, she was the first consultant midwife in the UK and elected to the chair of the UK Consultant Midwives Group. She had a leading role in designing and developing an award-winning Serenity and Halcyon, I always get the words wrong, birth centre in Birmingham. And she's got a huge commitment to ensuring compassionate care for women who've survived trauma. And she was presenting, and I have to give a trigger warning because she's going to, in her presentation, does include reference to child sexual abuse, which is very important for us to know about, because when we're seeing women in labour in the birth room who we may not have met before, we don't know their history. They may not have revealed their history. And I think what I always learn from Kathryn is that important thing of words, which I think will come over. So I'm going to ask Angelo to cue Kathryn's presentation now for you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're a bit sparse this side, aren't we? Can you all see me? I know I'm not very tall. I did put some heels on today because I knew I was standing behind a lectern. Thank you, Sue, as ever, and thank you for inviting me once again to speak and to tell you about this long-awaited book. Long-awaited for me. I don't know about you, but long-awaited for me. So I'm delighted to officially launch it here today. And the sad news is it arrived to me on Saturday, so I don't have supplies for you, but I do have a special prize for you that'll come up at the end. So what can I say? Is that which way am I? You just have to click. That one, yeah. No? Oh, yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. I had major IT issues over the weekend. My new PC must have some infection of some sort. I thought I'd immunised it totally, but it just wouldn't let me do anything, and it certainly wouldn't let me get onto PowerPoint. So I've done this on an old PC that's about 20 years old. So I do apologise. Normally I'm much more IT able than this. So the story behind this book, it's not my first book. I have done an edited book, and some of the authors are here today, Tracy being one, around fear and anxiety in childbearing, which was kind of the root of all my PhD, the culmination of that work. But I suppose all of my professional life I've been waiting to write this book. So it's become ever more important to me anyway, and to women that have come through either to see me through clinical routes or have contacted me directly myself. And I'm ever grateful that they found me, and I've worked with them either in a one-to-one capacity or online or via telephone and text or by their midwife. So there's been various ways that I've been able to support survivors of rape, sexual violence, child sex abuse, and those associated traumas. Some of you will be aware that there has been a series of major reports around, we don't tend to call it historic, but most of you will know that phrase, historic abuse of children, young people and women. Baroness Casey, in fact, did it was a rapid audit, they called it, because if you remember from some of the criticisms the government had against them was that Keir Starmer particularly would not sanction another review of grooming gangs and the impact on survivors. However, he did commission Baroness Casey to do this audit, and what she found was appalling, really appalling. And there were highlights on the news. And I have wrote a piece that Jenny put up last night on, what platform is it?
It's on Maternity.
Yeah, on the platform there, that kind of just highlights it a bit. Young women as young as 10 upwards to under 18 were being arrested and targeted as prostitutes. That's what they were called, prostitutes. Now, I find that completely offensive. How can a child decide to be a prostitute? And they're not sex workers because they're not working, they're underage. And the data that she had tried to collect about the ethnicity, about the origin, about the I suppose, like, where are these people that are forming these gangs? The police didn't collect that because they felt it would be too insightful of local cultures. And who are we letting down? We're letting down young women, young children, and... Whoa. Excuse me. Yeah, you can, not just yet, hang on a second. So, what I want you to understand about this book as well, it's historical in terms of capturing some of the key points through the century, I guess, on how we've come to be much more aware of abuse in our society. And the way I write, if any of you have read anything that I write very much from a personal perspective. I may use like the proper academic platforms, but I speak about me, and I speak about my story. And one of my, I suppose, inspirations was Maya Angelou. And if you've never read any of her work and you've never read Why the Caged Bird Sings, I invite you to do that, because it's very representative, actually, of what's coming round again now in the US about targeting ethnicities, but also about the way that children are treated in society. Next one, please. So I'd like to just read this short poem because I used to keep this. And do you know who uses this a lot? Anyone know? Uses this poem a lot. Michelle Obama. So this is just a snapshot out of the poem. It's called Out of the Huts of History's Shame, I Rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And that to me is so important. Next slide, please. So, a couple of questions for you. Have you ever been on a labour ward or even triage and a woman has declined an examination of some description? Yeah? And what do we say about this woman generally? She's difficult. She's not behaving normally. All of these kind of labelling phrases that we use, yeah? Have you ever had a feeling as a midwife that there's a woman on your caseload and that there's something just not clicking, there's something there, and you've got that instinctive feeling? Yeah. Have you ever seen a woman in labour who doesn't look like she can hear you, or she's somewhere else? Next slide, please. So what this book will not do for you is give you the solution, because the solutions are society's problem. But we are part of society, and I think we can offer explanations, and we can offer a great deal to our survivors. It will not offer treatments. It won't tell you to go to that kind of person, because every survivor is a different survivor who needs different things. It won't tell you why people do what they do to young and children. I've got various theories on it, and in the book itself, I've dedicated a chapter to abusers. And I think it's really important that you understand that, because in themselves there are themes, there are behaviours, there are psychological traits that you might want to understand a little bit more. And I want to give great thanks to my daughter, who used to work as a forensic psychologist in a sex offenders prison, and used to feed me lots and lots of work, and in particular a PhD that one of her students was doing. So that helped me understand a great deal. What this book does not do either, and it doesn't allow for silence anymore. And you will read in here about me, and you will read in here some of my story as a survivor, but also as a midwife and a therapist. Because I know out there in the great beyond, in every country I've been contacted by a clinician who is struggling with their own feelings about their own experience of abuse and questioning whether she can touch other people in a way that is not going to harm them. So I felt it was really important to write about this. Next slide, please. Oh, that's bang on, nearly. Yeah, I'm not usually this good. It's out on Amazon. Martin said, used to be Pinter and Martin, now it's Montag and Martin. But if you put Pinter and Martin, it will take you straight to it. It's on sale price at the moment. They're doing it for a few weeks just to encourage people. It's $12.99, by the way, so I think that's a really good price. There are chapters where you'll probably want to put it down afterwards. There are quotes and poems that I've tried to weave into how the book is structured. And there's great thanks as well for people who've been there for me along the way, and no more than my dear friend Sheena, who wrote the foreword for me. And in fact, I've known lots of people in here for many, many years. And Sheena's known about me and my story since I did a conference way back in Blackburn. So I feel like my truth is out there now. I am not the only survivor in my family, but I'm the only one who speaks about it because I want to educate people, and I want clinicians who walk in our NHS not to feel overwhelmed, not to feel angry, and not to minimise the pain that survivors carry with them when they come through those doors. And I think if you can at least take something from this in ways that you can help survivors, then actually the book's done all I intended to do. So I'll commend it to you, and thank you very much.
Okay, that was Kathryn, and thanks to Kathryn. She's not with us, so you may not be able to ask questions, but probably if you emailed Kathryn, she'd give you some answers, and certainly the book is available now, and testament to her work over the years. And rapidly, I'm moving now to our next presentation, which is from Professor Mary Renfrew, OBE. She's Professor Emerita at the University of Dundee in Scotland, and everyone will know Mary for many years. She's a health researcher, educator, and midwife who's conducted research in maternal and neonatal care, midwifery, and infant feeding for more than 40 years. And her innovative work has helped shape public health and maternity policy, practice, and education nationally and internationally. She's also the author of the recently published independent report on enabling safe, quality midwifery services and care in Northern Ireland, which we had a presentation from a few weeks back. She's also a member of the UK Professors in Midwifery and Maternal and Newborn Health, which is a network of senior academics in midwifery and maternal and newborn health. So welcome to Mary, who's here, but her presentation, which she did yesterday, will now play by Angelo. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here with you today to talk about this critically important topic. I'm just going to share my screen. While I do that, I want to say hello to everybody that's online as well as in the room. It's always a joy to speak at this conference and know that there's lots of people out there across the country and across the world As Sue just said, I'm a member of the UK Professors in Midwifery and Maternal and Newborn Health Group, and I'm speaking on behalf of them this morning, not just myself. I'm going to be presenting a paper that we have written, and I'll give you the link so you can go and read it. And this is the title of it. It's a policy briefing called From Evidence to Action. And every single word there is carefully chosen. The safe, effective, equitable, compassionate and respectful maternity and newborn care for all. That final bit is absolutely essential. It's a human rights-based approach, missing nobody out. Just to say, there's going to be a lot of information in the slides I present today, and I'm going to move quite quickly through them. So you may want to take photos of anything that you're particularly interested in. This presentation will be recorded and available in the way that the festival always does so helpfully. And also you can read the paper that I'm going to talk about online. What's the UK network of professors in midwifery and maternal and newborn health? I can hear you asking. It's all the professors in the field, around 30 of us senior interdisciplinary academics in maternal and newborn health. Many of us are midwives by background. Some absolutely are not. They're colleagues in sociology, psychology, anthropology, other fields. The group has been developing over the last few years and now is developing a number of consensus statements on key issues. You can see there on the slide, there was a manifesto in 2024 and the policy briefing that I'm talking about today. And if you follow that link through to the Council of Deans website, the Council of Deans in Health are who we are allied with. We have a page on their website, and there you can find links through to our documents. Although this policy briefing is intended to be UK-wide and the issues are UK-wide, some of what I say today will be relevant particularly to England. And I think because of all the activity in England around the new maternity review that's just been announced, the NHS 10-year plan, you'll understand why that is so resonant. But the issues are absolutely pertinent to the whole of the UK. So this is a summary basically of what I'm going to talk about today. The context of the current safety crisis with critical gaps and blind spots. Bit of background there. I'm going to talk about the learning from the independent report in Northern Ireland that Sue just mentioned. It was the first system-wide review of maternity care in the UK. It had a particular solutions-based, collaborative and evidence-informed approach, and we'll be talking about that. I'm going to talk then about essential lessons for future maternity reviewers, including England's newly announced national maternity investigation. And then we're going to propose a radical shift in approach for what's needed in terms of improving safety for women, for babies, and indeed for partners and families, and 7 key steps to building a new approach. This is the independent report from Northern Ireland. You can find it online. I'll give you the link to it shortly, but these are some of the really positive responses to it. It's been very, very widely welcomed by the Northern Ireland Government, the Department of Health, and as you'll see here, a range of professional organisations. I'll also be drawing a little bit on a letter we had published recently, this group here of colleagues in the Lancet, where we called out one of the Lancet editorials in terms of some of the issues that are really, really important in improving safety for women and babies. So you can go and look for that if you're interested. It's very short, in contrast to the Northern Ireland report, which is very long. So you might want to have a look at both of those. This is the content of my talk today in a nutshell. If you just want to look at one slide, this is the one. The argument we're making here is that safety for women, babies, and families is worsening, whether you look at survival, physical, mental health, inequalities, short,
long-term outcomes. And I'll show you some data around that in a moment. The actions taken so far have not resulted in the improvement that everybody is intending to make and that is badly needed. There are no quick fixes, but a radical shift is needed now to make the fundamental difference needed. And the new model that should be developed must be whole system, not piecemeal, informed by evidence of what works, co-designed with women, families, and interdisciplinary staff, and include both prevention and treatment across the whole continuum of care in hospital and community. So that is our thesis in a nutshell, but I'm going to unpick all of that. Starting with what is the context of the current safety crisis. I'm just going to give you a few quick graphs. So if you look at the left-hand one first, this is the most recent data from the Embrace report on stillbirths, neonatal deaths, so perinatal deaths as a whole. I want you just to look at the shape of that trajectory back to 2013. And what we see is extended perinatal deaths overall in the UK have fallen slightly, but they're more a plateau since about 2016, if you look at them back. We have seen recently a small decline in all stillbirths and antepartum stillbirths, but if you look to the bottom of this graph, where you've got intrapartum stillbirths and neonatal deaths, which are the focus of most of the safety programs, there has been no improvement. And that is a really important lesson for all of us. If you look at the right-hand graph, here we have stillbirths and neonatal deaths mapped to deprivation and ethnicity. And although we are seeing a small improvement, perhaps in Black families, we're seeing that uptick in Asian families in ethnicity, very little improvement. And if you look at the deprivation markers, what we're seeing is, again, that the women living in most deprived areas are those most at risk. The news has not improved, and in some markers has got worse. At the same time, safety for mothers has got worse. This is maternal mortality. Again, the Embrace data. This is quite complex graphs to look at quickly on a screen, but the key message is that maternal mortality is rising, and it's rising among underserved groups. So deprivation is critically important, as of course is ethnicity. And so we're seeing no improvement or worsening across those various groups, depending on which you look at. Especially in Asian women, interestingly, that's something we need to keep an eye on. Caesarean birth has not improved mortality, but it has increased morbidity and reduced women's choice. These are data from a range of sources. I don't think this will surprise anyone working in the maternity services, but briefly, the bottom blue line there is the average caesarean birth rate from OECD countries. That's those economically like us. The top lines there, that cluster of lines all going upwards, are the 4 UK countries, and indeed the Republic of Ireland, all of whom seem to be on the same trajectory, moving upwards. 2023, over 40%. And all the reports so far are saying this is still moving upwards and hasn't slowed or stopped. The green flat line there in the middle of that graph is actually the US, which interestingly used to be the benchmark for highly medicalized care. Something different is happening, and it's inevitable these rates will increase further. You will all understand the problems of repeat sections. So it's inevitable they will increase further with critically important long-term consequences for fertility, for maternal complications in subsequent pregnancies. We're already seeing that coming through. Morbidity for women has worsened. So here we've got the data on postpartum hemorrhage rates increasing. That's over 1,500 mils. These data are from Northern Ireland, but they map over to UK data. And the orange line at the top is following emergency cesarean. The turquoise line at the bottom is vaginal birth. And then in between, you've got elective cesarean and instrumental birth. So there are consequences to cesarean section and consequences to the current model of care that are incredibly important for women and for babies, and indeed for families, that need to be taken account of, at the very least, in staffing models for postnatal care. But we're not seeing signs that that is happening. And the consequences for women in terms of follow-up to cesarean section are incredibly important. So the next couple of slides, we've pulled out some critical gaps and blind spots in the current approach to safety. And I'm going to go through these quite quickly. We can give you evidence on all of these. These are not just our opinion, but I'm just going to crack through them quite quickly to lay them out as if you like, the foundation for how we understand what's needed to happen next. The current approach to safety is not informed by robust evidence of what works. So there's a bit of a disconnect between the findings of what's happening in maternity care and then the solutions that are proposed, which are not informed by robust evidence of what works. The voices of women with a range of experiences are missing. It's very, very good that women who have traumatic experiences are now being listened to, but there are women with a range of other experiences that need to come to the table as well. The voices of staff with experience and knowledge are missing. There's a lack of focus on the whole system, on the socioeconomic context of care, on out-of-hospital community settings, on the whole maternity journey, pregnancy through to postpartum and indeed pre-pregnancy, on the most vulnerable, and on psychological and cultural safety as well as clinical safety. The current model of care has been developed piecemeal. Nobody developed it the way it currently has evolved. It's not strategic and it hasn't been evaluated. The recommendations arising from those important single trust reviews have not been evaluated, and there is a potential for unintended consequences and knock-on effects. The root causes and system level problems are not being addressed. There's a kind of, I'm going to come back to this later, about how we move back from describing the problems to understanding why they're there. There is, as you all know, a disproportionate focus on acute care, on the mode of birth, and on midwives that tends to obscure other key issues when people get into debate about this. There's intense and long-standing staffing issues affecting all staff. I don't need to tell anyone listening to this about that. It's affecting morale, recruitment, retention across the board. There's a lot of silo working and disconnection between sectors, between community and hospital, between social care and healthcare, between disciplines, between obstetrics and midwifery, between neonatology, between GPs and social workers and so on, and across different settings, whether those are labour ward, postnatal care, antenatal care, midwifery-led settings, not joined up. There is an adversarial and contentious public discourse, and for as long as that continues, we are not going to solve the problems. We have to be able to speak openly without fear and on a level playing field. The essential contribution of education is not acknowledged, and students do not have enough consideration, or indeed newly qualified staff. Currently, the oversight and inspection mechanisms are ineffective. They're not identifying the key problems and the things that need to be fixed. The serious short and long-term consequences that are there for women and babies and families are not being addressed. They're not even being measured in terms of other than the immediate serious short term. But the longer term issues are not being examined. Litigation costs are higher than care costs, and anyone who doubts that, this is, first of all, on the left-hand side, the annual spend on maternity services, and on the right-hand side, the cost of harm from clinical negligence. Just imagine those two columns being turned the other way around, what we could achieve. And maternity care is out of line with every other specialty in terms of litigation. That long bar at the top is obstetrics, and that means all of maternity. Way disproportionate to anything else. Something very badly is wrong. It's a very difficult area that absolutely needs investment. What is the impact of these critical gaps and blind spots? What are they causing? Without doing all that analysis and catch up that I've just talked about, there is no strategic whole system plan for maternity and neonatal care with both prevention and treatment. There's a critical gap in the new 10-year plan where maternity care clearly is acknowledged as important, but the prevention, support, information, advice, and things that keep women and babies safe is missing, as well as treatment. There is no vision for what maternity and newborn services should look like. Inequalities are persisting. The blame and fear culture that has evolved is adversely affecting women and families and staff and runs through everything. There's a huge opportunity cost of the current model of care that's limiting staffing and resources for pregnancy and for postnatal care and for community. And for that, read midwifery. Not entirely midwifery, of course, but huge amounts of the antenatal and postnatal care and support, information, and community-based care is provided by midwives. And midwives cannot at the moment practice the full scope of their professional standards. They are locked into a model of care where quite a lot of what midwives know and are skilled at is limited. There are barriers to positive interprofessional debate and collaboration, I mentioned, and without that, we can't make progress. And there's unclear accountability. Who is responsible for what? And one question I will ask you here, just to illustrate that, is who is accountable for the care of women immediately following caesarean section? That's a debate over lunch. Carrying on with the impact, we have a lack of public trust. I've never known it like this. I've been a midwife for more than 45 years. I've never known such a lack of public trust. Effective interventions are not being implemented. You can talk about one-to-one care in labour. You can talk about continuity of midwifery care. Both of them would make a huge difference. Neither are being consistently implemented and funded. Appropriate interprofessional CPD that would be transformative is not being funded. Students and newly qualified staff are not being effectively supported. Women, families and staff have little input, if any, to the design, delivery and monitoring of services. There are unprecedented problems of staff well-being and morale, and staff and student recruitment and retention. Harm to women, babies and families continues. That is completely unacceptable. We need a whole new way of seeing. We need a radical shift. We need to build evidence and experience-informed whole system solutions together. And by together, I mean all of us. There is learning from what we've done in Northern Ireland. What I've just proposed is not aspirational, it's possible. It can be done. And on the way through doing this work and the follow-up to it, we have been working in exactly that way. This review was commissioned in 2023, published last year. It's titled Safe Quality Midwifery Services and Care. In fact, one of the terms of references was expanded to include the whole maternity review, whole maternity service. I'm going to focus on talking to you about what we did and why we did it, because that will then show you the way in which future work can and should happen. We had a very, very planned, systematic methodology that we developed together with dozens of colleagues from different backgrounds and with stakeholders from advocacy and user groups and service users themselves to advise how this should be done at all stages, right through these 6 interactive stages. We clarified our approach, our definitions, our methods. We worked very closely with our expert and advisory groups from Northern Ireland, the UK, and internationally. We looked at evidence reviews. We did evidence reviews. We looked at all the data, the information, the policy contacts. We went out and looked at all of that work. We had lots of engagement and participation, listening events, and working with people directly in workshops and meetings to develop the solutions, not just find out about their experiences, but to engage them in what we needed to do next. And that was a cross-section of women from different backgrounds, different deprivation, different ethnicity, different parts of Northern Ireland, different experiences, positive and negative. And we looked at positive service developments. It's always been a mystery to me about how anybody learns to do the right thing without seeing it working well. You can learn from failure, but actually to know what to do right, you have to see it and learn from it. We then did a big systematic analysis, synthesis, and developed the recommendations out of all of that. When we did a systematic analysis, we used the QMNC framework. Many of you will know the Lancet framework for quality maternal and newborn care, to look at all the aspects of care that women, babies, and families need. I'm not going to go through it today because I don't have time. I know many of you will know it. It's the foundation for the NMC standards of proficiency for midwives. A lot of what's in the current safety programme you could see up in the top right-hand box, where it's very much about, if you like, medical obstetric, neonatal services. Of course, some of the other elements are in there as well, but you need absolutely to be focused on all of those elements right across the whole continuum of care, and for every single woman, every single baby, without exception. So we analysed all our findings using that. We also did a root cause analysis. Now, I'm not going to talk through the slide in detail. What I want you to look at is the brown box on the right-hand side. Start there. And what we found was, some of you in the room may not be able to read this small font. People on screens will. Don't worry if you can't read it, because that's not really the point. In that brown box, you'll see very similar findings, sadly, to the other maternity reviews. Very, very difficult, serious outcomes for a lot of women. We then look back to see why that was happening. And in the pink box in the middle, you can see what the staff told us. We talked to lots of interdisciplinary staff about what was happening for them. And in there, you see some of the issues that have been identified, but we also found from staff what was going wrong. We talked with students and we listened to what was happening on a day-to-day basis for all of them. And we took that back into the grey box on the left to look at what was happening at the level of the whole health system. And that's the box where the action is most needed, is to change that. And that's about governance, it's about accountability, it's about workforce shortages, it's about silo working, it's about funding and commissioning. It's about how safety is focused in hospital and on birth, and not more widely. It's about monitoring and evaluation and the culture of fear and blame. It's about CPD, and it's about disregard of the long-term impact. So it's taking away the blaming of staff, or indeed the blaming of anybody, and saying, how did the system get here? Let's work at the system level, and then the staff who want to do a good job will be able to do a good job, and that will work for women. We also looked at the positive characteristics. We looked at from what women and families told us and staff about good care, but we also looked at 15 examples of good care, and we analysed those. And these are the key characteristics of positive examples where care was going really well. These are the examples that should be out there in the media alongside the negative examples, because they were very, very important. From all of that information, we developed a set of evidence-informed key conditions for every maternity and newborn service We very quickly put maternity and newborn together. You cannot separate women and babies at any point. We came out with this, and if you want to take any photograph of anything in this presentation, this is the one, because it's got those key conditions there, all evidenced, all derived from experience, and all agreed by the people who participated in this review. I don't have time to talk through all of them. I'm going to mention two. One at the top is meaningful participation of women, babies, families, communities, and staff. You cannot run a maternity service that works without those people actually helping to design it, as well as receiving care that's focused on their needs. And at the bottom there, we have whole system support for universal, accountable, quality midwifery. This is not special pleading for midwives. This is saying that if you're going to run a safe, quality maternity system, you have to ground it in quality midwifery. They are the only people who are there for every woman, every baby across the whole maternity journey, every family, without exception, and for both the woman and the baby. So absolutely essential, working in a completely integrated way into the interdisciplinary team with all the colleagues that midwives work with to keep women and babies safe and put them into a good start in their lives. All those other elements hugely matter. We turned that diagram around, and this really matters. We turned that diagram around to the woman's eye view. So that first one I showed you was the system view. This one now is the woman's eye view, and all those elements I just showed you are going around the outside. And for the woman, her journey is her journey that starts there in her family and community, goes through all the stages of her pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum and early weeks of baby's life, back into the arms of her family and community. Critically important, women and staff all agreed that these elements here at the bottom were the fundamental characteristics of a safe and quality service. And every single one of them was called out on the way through our work. And those have to sit alongside, within and under any clinical interventions that are put in place, alongside information and support and care for women at every stage of their maternity journey. I don't expect you to be able to read this. Please don't read the small print. I want you to look at the big print. This is the programme of recommendations from Northern Ireland, where we had an integrated set of recommendations that worked together. I just want you to look around the outside. We had whole system regional strategic developments that all worked together for a consistent service working at the level of the whole system. Data and review, so everybody in the picture, including the public, know what's happening. Building for the future, capacity building, caring for our students, but also developing capacity and research and CPD education all the way through. And then finally, half of this is taken up with safe quality care and services for all in all settings, joining up all those settings, all those stages across the continuum of care. So women and babies have safe care at every single stage from every single person they encounter, regardless of their level of need and what they need together. Quickly now, lessons for maternity reviews. I am nearly finished. These are the lessons we have done our best to draw to the attention of those involved in setting up the maternity in review in England and for any other country that plans to do this. There have to be these conditions in place for those maternity reviews to get to the bottom of it, to really come out with the right answers and not move off in any particular one direction, but to listen to diverse voices, to understand the whole system, to learn from strength as well as failure, to absolutely ground it in the relevant evidence, not just from interventions, but behaviour improvement and organisational change, to use a structured analysis to identify gaps and solutions, and a collaborative implementation plan that has people engaged in that with robust evaluation, and fundamentally to keep women and families safe during the process of the review. Finally, how do we achieve this? As I said, there's no quick fixes and there's no single solution. We have identified 7 important steps. These are not the only ones. Here we are. Hear all the voices. Learn from what works. Include the whole system and the whole maternity journey. Prevention and public health as well as emergencies. Build that into the 10-year plan. Tackle the blame culture and support staff and enable the full scope of midwifery. Develop a radically different relationship with women, rights-based, starting from what women want with co-design, and monitor, evaluate and review models of care and all changes. Thank you very much for listening to me today. I really appreciate it. And
Fabulous. Well, thank you, Mary. You didn't hear all of the applause at the end of that, but it was applauded. And I have to say, it's been a delight to listen to it again, because I wasn't quite seeing all the slides there, and I've got all my books in front of me, and I wish to commend to the audience this report, because there are shortened versions, but it's really a really good read, but it's just such a good model. I know I'm sort of gushing a little bit, but it's the sort of model you think this will help women, babies, families, midwives, and the midwives of the future, and all the workers within the service. And I'm thinking about the paediatricians, obstetricians, everyone, because it's so important for us to be working together and feeling. I mean, I'm feeling as though this is a solution to what everybody's talking about, a broken service, which really distresses me because nobody wants to work in something broken. It feels really positive. Now, Mary, I've got some questions coming through. So actually, I better pull back from my questions. Actually, I've got some questions, and I've got a question from Neil. And he's saying, how is the Renfrew report being taken forward in Northern Ireland? And how much interest has there been in England, Scotland, and in the Republic of Ireland?
Great question. Thank you, Neil. I mean, first of all, it was hugely welcomed in Northern Ireland. The government absolutely endorsed it with 2 small caveats in terms of timing of a couple of the recommendations. Otherwise, completely accepted it. The Department of Health completely accepted it. And on the way through, because we had built a collaborative process, the community was very engaged in actually helping to design the solutions, as well as potentially to implement them. And I think if I can summarize it, they started off really well. There was a phenomenal energy and a huge commitment. I think there's such a strong driver for business as usual. And I think unless there's a really, really, really huge incentive to change, it's really hard to do that and to do that quickly. They're still very committed. They're still moving forward with it. But of course, there are hurdles to overcome. Those are organizational hurdles. They're funding hurdles. They're everybody being already stressed and tired with the day job hurdles. I'm really truly hoping that some of the biggest organizational hurdles will get dealt with. I think there's a real hope that that will then free up quite a bit of the slow movement there. In terms of the other 3 countries, Scotland has seemed to be really interested. We've talked to them. They're currently developing standards for the maternity service, and they've been considering this work on the way through. Wales is absolutely indicating that they're very interested, and they've got plans. I'm not sure of the details yet. I don't think the details have been firmed up, but they've certainly said they're really interested. England a bit less so. I mean, a lot of people really like it. There's been huge positive responses from lots of people, from the professional organizations that you saw on one of the slides. Regulator. So I don't know is the answer to that. And I really like to see much more of a debate. You know, we're not proposing this as the answer. What we're saying is that in developing this methodology, in engaging all the people that we engage, experts from all different perspectives and disciplines, and in developing ways of doing collaboration, we think we actually evolved a methodology that can get in and under and understand what's happening and develop solutions that people then want to do together with advocacy groups and charities, with service users themselves, with all the disciplines, both in the community and in hospital settings, and with managers and with boards and with commissioners and funders, and bringing all those perspectives in. So we think there's a huge opportunity for England just at this moment, where they're really, really clearly committed and clearly keen to move forward, to say, okay, what are the lessons for England? So I really hope that they're reading it and thinking about how they can draw lessons from it.
And do you think it could be? I mean, if you were going to do this program, because it's very much, there's a sort of individuality about it in a way, isn't there? If you're going to the service users, so maybe the services in the north would be different to the ones in the south, or do you think there's a sort of English model that you, because it feels to me as though a really crucial bit of this is pulling in the users, the women and the families. And would they be the same in each part of the country? I would be very keen to see this. I would love to see it, because I think it's, for me, it's so exciting.
The thing about the methodology is that you can do a kind of, I'm not quite sure what I'd call it, but you can have a central organizing system, but that then it would be expressed differently in each region and expressed differently potentially in each trust. Because what you can do, and I have to say, what we found in Northern Ireland exactly mirrored all the other reviews. There were differences, different data, different context. Northern Ireland is very, very high deprivation compared to certainly England, although of course deprivation is not evenly distributed. You'll get pockets of very high deprivation in some areas. Now that means you've got to deliver different services in each area. But if you have a principle that we had, that services should be geared to the population, then what you have to do is kind of follow this methodology to say, so what's the context? You know, what's the population need? Who are we serving? Is it rural? Is it urban? Is it high deprivation? Is it high ethnicity? And so on. So if you follow this methodology, you can certainly have a kind of clear national picture, but then each region, or indeed each trust, would then have its own context to bring to bear and say, okay, so we need to do that thing and that thing and that thing more. And then somewhere else you would prioritize other recommendations potentially. So yes, there would need to be a consistent national approach to make sure that everybody was up to scratch. But then the actual implementation, so you need to separate out the description, the diagnosis, the what's happening, from the evidence of what's needed, from the designing the solutions. Those are all different stages that need a different lens. And then how do you implement that? That needs its own evidence base to how to create change. You're not just going to do more inductions, and I'm not, excuse me, being derogatory about that, but you can decide to do more inductions and do more inductions. this is about changing hearts and minds, changing culture, changing behavior, changing the way the funding moves through the system. So you've got to have evidence on how to shift a system and how people can be part of that shift and support that shift and bring everybody with them. There's lots of evidence on how to do that, the organizational change, the behavior change. So we have to deploy that evidence.
So where would you start, Mary? If we're looking at the sort of different facets of it, because I think one of the things that hit me when your presentation was the cost of harm versus cost of care. I mean, that's a huge thing, because one of the other things is when you're looking at something as big as this, I mean, any of these reviews or into services must be costing a lot of money. And if you were doing a whole country, which would be a good thing to do, I think, because you're right, this has evolved, hasn't it? This whole service, and it's really, has it evolved for women and babies and families, or has it evolved just because it's been a sort of service that's sort of been grown up the way it's had to at the time?
I think the money's an interesting thing, Sue. It depends what you decide to spend the money on in a review like this. And I have to say, what happened in Northern Ireland was kind of lean and fit. There was an awful lot of voluntary work went on in terms of the expert group and the advisory group, and people absolutely wanting to get the right answers. So a lot of that collaboration was people wanting to be engaged. And all the work went towards solutions. We spent enough time listening to the problems to make sure we had a good grasp and the problems from everybody's point of view, but then we focused everybody's attention on the solutions. So we wanted women's views, we wanted staff views, we wanted policymakers' views, we wanted researchers' views, we wanted educators' views, we wanted students' views. And if you're going to do one thing, you have to set up a system where you can listen to all of those views, respect all of those views, honor all of those views, and try and move people towards agreeing solutions in line with the evidence. Because while we did all that listening, we also did a set of evidence reviews to say, this is what a service should look like, so that we weren't bringing in recommendations that actually weren't going to make a difference to outcomes and to experiences. And so it's very much about a collaborative approach. And that's definitely about different disciplines. It's hugely about listening to women and families. But it's also listening to the junior as well as the senior, you know, student voices as well as chief exec voices, and everybody in between, and across the different sectors. So listening to the public people working in public health, listening to GPs, listening to neonatal units, listening to obstetricians, listening to midwives. And one of the really sad things is the midwives tend to see the whole picture, and they could tell me the whole picture of what was happening. Other disciplines are more focused a bit in where they're working, but because midwives work all settings, the whole continuum, they see all of it. And it was heartbreaking to hear what they and the students indeed were representing. So I didn't quite answer your question, but I would absolutely start by listening to a range of voices. Certainly women with very, very difficult experiences, but other women as well who've had a range of difficult experiences, but not quite in that perinatal loss way. Because actually, what I haven't really said clearly before is the problem is bigger than we think it is. Now, what do I mean by that? We certainly need to hear the voices of the women who have had desperate, traumatic times. undoubtedly. When you listen to the other women, you find that they've had many of them have had also really difficult experiences. And to here, I will bring postnatal care into the conversation. Every single woman goes through postnatal care of some sort. Some of that will be bereavement care. For many women, that will be hospital-based postnatal care very quickly and then out to the community. It has been absolutely stripped bare with the current model of care. Midwives keep being pulled off into labour ward. Women are sent home very early. More than 40% of them have had major abdominal surgery, and then they also have a baby to look after. And then they're sent home to the community, not always with proper community support, because we all know that community-based midwifery has been decimated. So actually, you have to listen to all the voices of women to understand that the problem is bigger even than maybe we think it is. So listening to women, listening to the evidence, and having some sort of disseminated model where the implementation and solution process can get pushed down and through and out in a consistent way out to each and every trust.
I mean, I think it was interesting because what I was hearing is about listening to voices that aren't always heard, and it's not just the women that have had terrible experiences, because sometimes a woman might have had a very bad experience, but because of that good package of midwifery care, which does happen somewhere along the line, and we need to kind of celebrate that and find out how we can bring that into the whole service as well, and value those experiences, because it can become just a focus on the really bad, can't it?
It absolutely can. The other thing you have to do is reach out and make sure you're hearing women from different backgrounds and different communities, so different experiences, but also women who have particular needs. And there are many sad things about our current situation. One is that midwives are ideally placed to really, truly support women with socioeconomic challenges, women who are particularly vulnerable because of mental health, women whose, as we heard from Kathryn earlier on, have very difficult histories themselves. Midwives are ideally placed to do that work, but it's not being funded, and the midwifery service isn't staffed to do it. And so, we're completely missing the opportunity. It's a huge missed opportunity to help women and babies have the best start in life. And midwives have the skills. They just need to be supported and funded properly to do that.
And how would you sell that to the policymakers, Mary? Because the first thing someone's going to say is, well, we can't afford anything more.
I think at the moment, the policy door is open.
Okay.
Well, I do. Look at the 10-year plan.
I've started.
Look at the 10-year plan in England. The message about the importance of prevention has got through. The sad thing is it hasn't got through in regard to maternity care, but it's got through in regard to healthcare. And I think the policymakers know that they don't know the answers. They know that what's happening isn't working because the data just are the way we've seen them. And actually, I honestly think policymakers are seeking answers, but they need to be given different answers than what we've been talking about for the last 10 years. We have to take the spotlight back and off that very, very kind of crunch bit in labour and birth to prevent those problems, to have women coming in who are better informed because they've been given information and they've had conversations with their midwife and they understand what's likely to happen, and who are then properly supported postnatally with both physical and mental health, and indeed well-being of the baby and infant feeding and all the rest of it afterwards. That prevention of problems further down the line is absolutely essential. And if we can just get that message into the policymakers, I think they actually want to hear it. I do think they want to hear it.
Well, that should be music to our ears if they're going to accept beautiful evidence-based systems. I'm just going to check the questions. Forgive me, audience. I look away at my other screen to look if there's any more questions. You've been a bit shy tonight, I think. And now I have another question from Neil. Neil's having another go. Hello, Neil. How should physical services be aligned between home alongside maternity unit and emergency, and the role of neonatal and medical support along the journey, not just the acute end? I think you might have answered a bit of that, Mary.
What I would say is read the recommendations in the Northern Ireland report, Neil, because we had a go at this. Because what we found was a complete disjunction between what was happening in the hospital, what was happening in the midwifery units, what was happening in home births, and the ambulance services. And we worked really hard on how to join those up, and how to make sure that they were all working effectively. So I'm not going to try and summarize that tonight. But we did actually have a number of very critical recommendations around how that should happen. The interesting thing is a lot of staff in maternity services think they work in hospitals. They don't necessarily see that their responsibility is actually to women at home, in the community. And there needs to be a bit of a reset around if people are on call, what they're on call for. And also, I've talked a lot about interdisciplinary CPD in the report. That is really, really, really important. So people understand each other's roles. People understand that if a midwife is going out to a home birth, for example, what education she might need, what she needs to understand. Does she need a bit of extra training in something, or if a woman has chosen to be in a setting outside of guidance, in quotation marks, then is the interdisciplinary team aware that that woman is in labour in a midwifery unit or at home, and what are they doing to support the woman, and what are they doing to support the midwife who is there? So that's about communication, it's about planning, and it's absolutely about training and having education together in the same place. Let me give you one example. I spoke to neonatologists, pediatricians, neonatologists, as well as to obstetricians, and it ran to GPs, and it was really clear that so babies are having more respiratory problems because babies have more respiratory problems at cesarean section than babies who are born physiologically. And that was having a knock-on effect on neonatologists' workload and admissions into neonatal units. But there wasn't a kind of strategic discussion about that with either the commissioners of services or between the neonatologists and the obstetricians and the midwives. There wasn't a forum for people to discuss that strategically. That kind of stuff really, really matters, and it really, really helps. Tackling that silo working.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's much more about getting to know each other, and there's no better way than doing I don't know, a skills drill or something with other colleagues and laughing when you get things wrong and reflecting together. This is music to my ears. And also, I have to say, this hour we've had a little bit extra than an hour. And I thank you for that, because I could listen to you for hours, Mary. And congratulations. I think this policy briefing is fab, because and this is on your list as well. Short and sweet, but it's got the key elements. Really useful. But do look at the big report, because that really, you'll want to have that in your own unit, I have to say, if you haven't, or if you're not in Northern Ireland. But thank you so much, Mary, for joining us for the questions, because I know you've had a busy time, and congratulations again on that little boy. That's wonderful. And thank you for our use of your presentation, which I think will be circulating next Thursday with the newsletter and this Friday morning as a podcast, so people can really enjoy and get to grips with this. For those of you watching, if you might want to watch this again, because I have to say I've listened to Mary twice, and I mean, I guess I was listening to different things yesterday as well, but it's been fantastic, and it's all sinking in nicely, because some of it's quite complex, some of it you have to think about quite hard. So do listen and have a discussion with your colleagues. Share in your unit. It'd be really useful to do that. Thank you to Angelo for recording all of this, and thank you to Paul for sending in the questions and everything through there. Next week we're going to be looking at love in midwifery. With the lovely doctors Diane Menage and Jenny Patterson, who we've had before, who've talked about this. It sounds a bit obvious, love, but I mean, this is a lot of what makes us tick, isn't it? Why are we here? What gives us the joy in caring for mothers, babies, and their families? Also, the Cardiff Festival is coming on the 23rd of September, but the call for papers is out now. So if you're doing something exciting, some practice, research, change in work, put in a submission, and so you can share with your colleagues about that. That'd be lovely. In the meantime, stay safe and well, and look after yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, different speaker, but thank you so much, Mary, and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.